Welcome. If you're new here, please take a second to subscribe. It really helps support this journey and keeps you inspired along the way. Today, I want to share something personal, something that goes deeper than just learning English. It's about the struggle, the self-doubt, and the little victories that eventually led me to confidence. Because the truth is, speaking English fluently isn't just about grammar or vocabulary, it's about courage, persistence, and believing in yourself even when it feels impossible. But let me ask you this. Have you ever felt nervous, even embarrassed, when trying to speak English? Maybe your mind goes blank, or you know the words but they just won't come out. I know that feeling all too well, because I was there. And today, I want to share how I turned that fear into confidence, and how you can too. When I first started learning English, I felt like I was trapped in a room full of people speaking a secret language I could never understand. I remember sitting in classrooms, watching my teacher's lips move quickly, while my brain worked slowly, trying to catch just one or two words. The sentences sounded like music, but the melody was too fast for me to follow. I struggled not only with understanding but also with speaking. Whenever I opened my mouth, my tongue felt heavy. Words came out broken, my accent was strong, and I could see people's faces change. They either smiled politely, or worse, they looked confused. That confused look used to crush me. I thought, maybe I'll never be good enough in English. At that time, my confidence was close to zero. I avoided conversations, especially with native speakers. If someone asked me a simple question like "How are you?" my heart raced. I worried about saying something wrong, about being laughed at, about making a fool of myself. So instead of practicing, I stayed silent. I hid behind my fear. But here's the truth I learned later. Silence doesn't help you learn a language. Fear doesn't teach you new words. Avoiding mistakes doesn't build fluency. All it does is keep you stuck. Looking back, I realized that the first step to gaining confidence in English was admitting that I had a problem. I had to be honest with myself. I was not confident because I was not practicing enough. I was waiting for some magical day when I would suddenly feel ready to speak perfectly. But that day never came. I remember one painful moment clearly. I was at a cafe when a tourist came up to me and asked for directions in English. I knew the answer. I knew exactly where they needed to go, but I froze. My brain shouted, "Say it, say it," but my mouth stayed shut. After a few awkward seconds, the tourist walked away, probably thinking I didn't understand. That day I felt humiliated. I knew I couldn't let fear control me forever. That was the beginning of my journey. I made a decision. I would not wait for confidence to come before speaking English. I would speak first, even if I was afraid, and confidence would come later. This realization was like opening a locked door. Suddenly, I understood that confidence isn't something you are born with, it's something you build. But how do you build it when your voice shakes and your grammar is broken? I started small, very small. At first, I talked to myself. I described what I was doing. I am washing the dishes. I am going to the store. It felt silly, but it helped me practice forming sentences without pressure. Then I started listening more carefully. I watched movies in English, not to understand every word, but to train my ear. I paid attention to how people connected words, how they used intonation. Sometimes I repeated after them, trying to copy the rhythm of their speech. Most importantly, I began to change my mindset. Instead of saying I'm bad at English, I told myself, I'm learning English. Instead of thinking I always make mistakes, I reminded myself, mistakes are part of the process. These small mindset shifts gave me the courage to keep going. Confidence didn't come overnight, but the journey had started. And step by step, I was going to transform my relationship with English. The real turning point in my journey came when I finally understood one powerful truth. Confidence is not the result of perfection. It is the result of practice. For so long, I believed I had to be ready before speaking English. I thought I needed the perfect vocabulary, the perfect accent, the perfect grammar. I told myself, one day, when I know enough, I'll finally start speaking. But that day never came. The more I waited, the more nervous I became. Then something happened that changed my thinking forever. I joined a small online English group. The teacher asked us to introduce ourselves. My instinct was to stay silent, to avoid embarrassment. But then she said something I'll never forget. Don't try to be perfect. Try to be understood. That sentence hit me hard. I realized I was chasing the wrong goal. I didn't need to speak perfectly. I just needed to communicate. People didn't care if my grammar was 100% correct or if my accent was heavy. They cared about the message, the connection. So for the first time, I introduced myself in English without overthinking. I stumbled on a few words, I mixed up tenses, but guess what? People understood me. They smiled, they replied, and the conversation continued. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Progress. That day, I made a decision. I would practice as much as possible, without waiting for perfection. If I made mistakes, I would learn from them. If people corrected me, I would thank them instead of feeling ashamed. This new mindset gave me freedom. It allowed me to experiment, to try to fail, and to grow. Slowly, my fear of speaking started to fade. Here are the exact steps I took during this turning point. 1. I set small, realistic goals. Instead of saying, I want to be fluent in English, which felt overwhelming, I started with simple goals like, I will introduce myself in English today, or I will order food in English this week. These small wins built my confidence little by little. 2. I practiced every single day. Even if it was only 10 minutes, I made sure to use English daily. Some days I read an article, other days I watched a short video and repeated the sentences out loud. The key was consistency, not perfection. 3. I focused on communication, not grammar. This was difficult at first because I had been taught that grammar was everything. But I forced myself to let go of that pressure. Instead, I asked myself, did the other person understand me? If the answer was yes, then I succeeded even if my sentence wasn't perfect. 4. I started shadowing. Shadowing means listening to a native speaker and repeating exactly what they say, almost like an echo. At first, it was hard to keep up, but it trained my mouth, my tongue, and my ear. It helped me sound more natural and gave me confidence in pronunciation. 5. I celebrated mistakes. This was the hardest shift. Instead of feeling bad about mistakes, I began to see them as proof that I was practicing. No mistakes meant I wasn't trying, so each mistake became a stepping stone, not a failure. Over time, I noticed something surprising. The more I practiced, the less I cared about what people thought of me. My focus shifted from fear of judgment to excitement about progress. I remember another key moment. I was speaking with a foreign friend, and I made a mistake in grammar. I stopped and said, "Oh, sorry, my English is not perfect." My friend smiled and said, "Don't worry, your English is great. I understand everything." That was when I truly realized most people are not judging me. In fact, many people admire the effort it takes to learn another language. That thought gave me courage. Confidence, I discovered, doesn't arrive in a big explosion. It grows quietly, step by step, with every practice session, every conversation, every brave attempt. The secret is not to wait for perfection, but to keep moving forward, even when you feel uncertain. This was the turning point that transformed me from a silent learner into an active speaker. And it laid the foundation for all the progress I made later. Once I understood that confidence comes from practice, I knew I had to build strong daily habits. Learning English could no longer be something I did only when I had time. It had to become part of my lifestyle, like brushing my teeth or eating breakfast. The truth is, confidence in English isn't built in one big leap. It's built in small, daily steps. So I created routines that made English a natural part of my everyday life. At first, I didn't know where to start. English felt huge, like a mountain. There were so many things: grammar, vocabulary, listening, speaking, writing. I felt overwhelmed, so I decided to simplify. I told myself, focus on the basics, but do them every day. Here's exactly how I structured my daily English routine. 1. Listening practice, training my ears. Every morning, while having breakfast or traveling, I listened to English. Sometimes it was a podcast, sometimes a YouTube video, sometimes just music. I didn't worry about understanding everything. I let the sounds of English fill my ears. This trained me to get comfortable with the rhythm of the language. One trick I used was listening to the same audio multiple times. The first time, I understood little. The second time, a bit more. By the third or fourth listen, I could catch details I had missed before. This repetition boosted my confidence because I could see real progress. 2. Shadowing practice, training my mouth. After listening, I spent 5 to 10 minutes shadowing. I picked a short clip of a native speaker and tried to repeat their words exactly, copying the speed, the tone, and even the pauses. At first, I felt ridiculous. My tongue twisted, my voice stumbled. But slowly, my mouth got used to producing English sounds. This was one of the most powerful techniques I discovered. Shadowing not only improved my pronunciation, it also gave me the courage to speak faster and more naturally. 3. Talking to myself, practicing without pressure. I realized I didn't need another person to practice speaking. I could speak to myself anytime, anywhere. While cooking, I said, I'm chopping onions. Now I'm adding all. When walking, I said, the weather is sunny. I'm going to the store. These little self-talk exercises helped me think in English instead of translating from my native language. And because nobody was listening, I felt no fear of mistakes. 4. Writing daily, organizing my thoughts. Each night before bed, I wrote a short paragraph in English. Sometimes it was about my day, sometimes about my feelings, sometimes about a topic I liked. Writing helped me practice new vocabulary and notice grammar patterns. Over time, I saw my sentences becoming smoother and longer. 5. Reading for fun, learning naturally. I chose simple books, blogs, or even subtitles. Reading gave me new words in context, which is much easier than memorizing lists. When I found a new word, I didn't just write it down, I used it in a sentence right away. These daily habits might sound small, but they had a big effect. Because I was practicing every single day, I started feeling more comfortable with English. My ears understood faster, my tongue moved more easily, my brain switched to English more naturally. The biggest benefit was consistency. By doing a little every day, I stopped seeing English as a school subject and started seeing it as a normal part of my life. That shift was powerful. Of course, there were days when I felt lazy or discouraged. Sometimes I didn't want to listen to another podcast or write another paragraph. On those days, I reminded myself, confidence is built by showing up even when you don't feel like it. So I pushed myself to do at least 5 minutes. And almost every time, those 5 minutes turned into 20. Slowly, my confidence grew. Speaking English became less scary because my brain and my mouth were used to it. I didn't have to think so much before saying something. It started to flow naturally. Looking back, I realized this. Big changes come from small habits repeated daily. My daily routines didn't just improve my English, they made me believe in myself. And that belief was the foundation of my confidence. If I'm honest, the biggest enemy I faced in learning English was not grammar, not vocabulary, not pronunciation. It was fear. Fear of mistakes, fear of sounding stupid, fear of being laughed at. For a long time, that fear kept me silent. I remember sitting in conversations, knowing the answer, but staying quiet because I was scared my English wasn't good enough. I'd rehearse sentences in my head, but by the time I felt ready to speak, the moment had passed. It felt like being trapped inside my own thoughts. The breakthrough came when I realized this. The people who learn fastest are the ones who make the most mistakes. Think about a child learning to speak. They don't care about mistakes. They say things wrong all the time, and the adults laugh not in a cruel way, but with love. The child keeps speaking anyway, and because they keep speaking, they keep improving. So why was I, as an adult, so afraid? My problem wasn't my English, it was my pride. I didn't want to look weak. I didn't want to lose face. The moment I accepted that mistakes were not a sign of weakness but a sign of progress, everything changed. Here are the strategies that helped me overcome my fear of mistakes. 1. I changed how I defined success. Before, success meant speaking without errors, but that definition only made me anxious, so I created a new rule. Success means communicating my message. If the other person understood me, I won even if my grammar was wrong. 2. I practiced in safe spaces first. I started speaking English with people I trusted, close friends, other learners, online language partners. These were people who didn't judge me, people who understood the struggle. Because I felt safe, I could experiment with new words and expressions without fear. 3. I laughed at my own mistakes. This was a game changer. Whenever I said something funny by accident, I laughed instead of feeling embarrassed. One time, I wanted to say I'm full after eating, but I accidentally said I'm full. Everyone laughed, including me. Instead of running away, I used it as a story to remember the correct phrase. Humor made mistakes less scary. 4. I asked for corrections. Instead of hiding from feedback, I started to invite it. I told people, please correct me if I'm wrong. At first, it was uncomfortable to be corrected, but then I realized every correction was like free teaching. Why should I be ashamed of learning? 5. I reminded myself that natives also make mistakes. This was a comforting truth. Even native speakers of English say things wrong, forget words, or mispronounce names. The difference is they don't stop talking because of it. So why should I? Slowly, I began to notice something interesting. The more mistakes I made, the faster my confidence grew. It was as if each mistake was a brick in the foundation of my English. The fear started to shrink, and in its place, courage appeared. One powerful moment stands out in my memory. I was giving a short introduction at a study group, and I accidentally mixed up past and present tense. Instead of panicking, I smiled and said, "Oops, mistake, but you understand me, right?" Everyone laughed and nodded, and in that moment, I felt free. Here's the truth. Mistakes are not walls, they are doors. Each mistake opens a new lesson, a new improvement, a new chance to grow. The people who succeed in English are not the ones who avoid mistakes, but the ones who make thousands of them and keep going. By changing my relationship with mistakes, I transformed fear into fuel. Every error became evidence that I was trying, practicing, and moving forward. And that mindset gave me a new kind of power. The power to speak, even when I wasn't sure, because I trusted myself to keep learning. After I made peace with mistakes, I noticed something new. My conversations often stopped because I simply didn't know the right words. I could say basic things, but when topics became deeper like work, travel, or emotions, I felt stuck. Vocabulary became my next challenge. At first, I tried the traditional way. Long lists of words written in notebooks. But here's the truth. I forgot them almost as quickly as I wrote them. Memorizing without context didn't work for me. I realized I needed a different approach. I had to learn words in real-life situations, not just from lists. So I changed my strategy. Instead of asking, "How many words can I memorize?" I asked, "How many words can I actually use?" Here are the methods I used to grow my vocabulary naturally and effectively. 1. Learning words in context. Whenever I read an article, watched a movie, or listened to a podcast, I paid attention to the words I didn't know. But I didn't just look up the meaning, I looked at how the word was used in a sentence. For example, when I came across the word challenge, I noticed phrases like face a challenge, big challenge, challenge yourself. Learning words with their natural partners made them easier to remember and use. 2. Using the 3 times rule. If I learned a new word, I forced myself to use it 3 times that same day. For example, after learning the word curious, I wrote, "I'm curious about English. My little brother is curious about animals, and she asked a curious question." This rule helped move the word from my notebook into my active vocabulary. 3. Connecting words to my life. Instead of memorizing random words, I focused on words that mattered to me. I asked, "What do I talk about often?" For example, since I love sports, I learned words like training, competition, and injury. Because these words were part of my real conversations, I used them often, which made me remember them better. 4. Talking to myself with new words. Whenever I learned a new vocabulary, I practiced speaking it out loud in sentences about my day. If the new word was opportunity, I said, "This English group is a great opportunity for me." If the word was progress, I said, "I'm making progress in speaking." This practice helped me use new words quickly before I forgot them. 5. Creating fun associations. Some words were hard to remember, so I used imagination. For example, the word ancient reminded me of an old temple in my city, so I connected them in my mind. The word delicious made me think of my grandmother's cooking. By linking words to pictures, places, or emotions, they stuck in my memory. Over time, these strategies paid off. I started noticing my vocabulary expanding not in a forced way, but naturally through daily life. Instead of freezing in conversations, I had more words ready to use. And the more words I had, the more confident I felt. Here's what I learned. Vocabulary is not about knowing all the words in the dictionary. It's about knowing the words you actually need and being able to use them. Even with a small number of words, if you can use them confidently, you can have meaningful conversations. And the more I used English in real life, the faster my vocabulary grew. Books, songs, conversations, even mistakes, all of them became teachers. I realized that every day was full of opportunities to learn new words, if only I paid attention. Building vocabulary this way didn't just improve my English, it gave me the tools to connect, to share, and to express who I really was. And that, more than anything, strengthened my confidence. By this stage, I had built habits, learned to embrace mistakes, and expanded my vocabulary. But there was still one big challenge left. actually speaking with people. Practicing alone listening, shadowing, talking to myself was safe, but conversations with real people, that was the real test, and honestly, I was terrified. Here are the strategies I used to build my speaking skills with people. 1. Starting with short interactions. Instead of jumping into long, complex conversations, I focused on short exchanges, ordering food, asking for directions, greeting a neighbor. These short moments felt less scary but gave me real practice. 2. Preparing useful phrases. Before going out, I prepared 2 to 3 phrases I might need. For example, before going to a restaurant, I practiced, "I'd like to order," or "Can I have?" Having these ready reduced my fear of getting stuck. 3. Joining language exchanges. I joined online groups where learners and native speakers practiced together. The first few sessions were nerve-wracking. I spoke slowly, searching for words, but everyone was supportive. These exchanges taught me that people are usually kind and patient when you're learning. 4. Using the yes and method. In conversations, I used a simple trick. When someone said something, I replied with yes and to keep the talk going. For example, them, "I love football." Me, "Yes, and I play football with my friends every weekend." This helped me avoid one-word answers and made me sound more engaged. 5. Focusing on listening, not just speaking. At first, I was so nervous about speaking that I didn't listen carefully. But then I realized, conversations are not about perfect answers, they're about connection. When I focused on listening with curiosity, speaking became easier because I could respond naturally. The more I practiced, the more confident I felt. At first, my conversations were short and clumsy. Then they became longer. Soon I was sharing opinions, telling stories, even making jokes. Of course, there were still awkward times. I sometimes got stuck, forgot words, or misunderstood. But instead of running away, I learned simple strategies. If I didn't know a word, I described it. It's like the thing you use to cut paper. If I didn't understand, I asked, "Can you say that again, slowly?" If I made a mistake, I smiled and corrected myself. These strategies kept the conversation moving. And over time, I realized the truth. People don't care if your English is perfect. They care that you're trying to connect. The more I spoke, the more my confidence grew. Conversations that once terrified me became exciting opportunities. Speaking with people turned English from a school subject into a living language, something real, something human. And each conversation, no matter how small, became a brick in the wall of my confidence. One of the biggest changes in my journey didn't happen in my mouth or ears, it happened in my mind. For a long time, I was still thinking in my native language first, then translating into English. That made speaking slow and stressful. By the time I translated a sentence in my head, the conversation had already moved on. I realized that if I wanted to be truly confident, I had to start thinking in English. At first, that idea sounded impossible. How could I think in a language I didn't fully understand? But I learned that thinking in English doesn't mean you know every word. It means you stop depending on translation and start using the English you already know to express yourself. Here's how I trained my brain to think in English. 1. Naming things around me. Whenever I looked at something, I said its English name in my head: chair, window, phone, water. If I didn't know the word, I looked it up. Soon my brain was full of little English labels. 2. Describing my actions in real time. When cooking, I thought, "I'm chopping vegetables." When walking, I thought, "I'm crossing the street." This habit forced me to practice forming English sentences naturally, without translation. 3. Using simple English, not perfect English. At first, I tried to translate complex sentences from my native language, but that frustrated me, so I simplified. Instead of thinking, I am feeling extremely exhausted because I work continuously for several hours, I thought, I'm very tired. I worked for many hours. It wasn't perfect, but it was clear and much faster. 4. Keeping an English diary in my mind. Throughout the day, I imagined telling someone about my experiences in English. For example, while walking home, I thought, today was good. I learned 3 new words. I talked to a friend. These little mental diaries trained me to narrate my life in English. 5. Dreaming in English. This surprised me. After months of practicing, I started having dreams where people spoke English. Sometimes I replied in English too. It didn't happen every night, but the first time it did, I woke up smiling. It was proof that my brain was slowly accepting English as a natural language, not a foreign one. Shifting to thinking in English made a huge difference. Conversations became easier because I no longer had to translate everything. Words came faster, sentences flowed more naturally. And, most importantly, I started to feel like English was part of me, not something outside of me. Of course, it wasn't perfect. Sometimes I got stuck when I didn't know a word. But instead of panicking, I learned to work around it. If I couldn't remember umbrella, I thought, the thing for rain. If I didn't know borrow, I said, can you give me this, and I give it back later. Communication is not about fancy words, it's about creativity and clarity. Confidence doesn't come from knowing everything. It comes from trusting yourself to use what you know. And thinking in English is the bridge between learning and living the language. After months of steady practice, I had built a foundation. Habits, daily routines, media, and practice with friends. But there was still one big test: using English in real situations where the outcome mattered. It's one thing to practice with yourself, or even with a language partner. It's another thing to walk into a job interview, give a presentation, or talk to strangers while traveling. At first, the thought made my stomach turn. What if I froze? What if I embarrass myself? But I knew that true confidence only comes when you put yourself in the arena. So, I started saying yes to real-life opportunities. 1. At school and work. My first challenge was in class. I had to give a short presentation in English. My hands were shaking, and my voice trembled. But instead of focusing on perfection, I remembered my new mindset: communication, not flawless grammar. I prepared simple points, practiced them out loud, and even rehearsed in front of the mirror. When the day came, I looked at my classmates and thought, just share your message. I stumbled over a few words, but I finished. The applause, though small, gave me a powerful boost. At work, I volunteered to write short emails in English and later joined calls with international colleagues. The first calls were terrifying. I worried about my accent and speed. But each time I survived, I walked away stronger. Slowly, my colleagues started to compliment me. One even said, "Your English is improving a lot." That single sentence was fuel for my confidence. 2. Traveling. Travel was another turning point. On my first trip abroad, I was forced to use English for everything: buying tickets, asking for directions, ordering food. At first, I felt nervous every time I had to speak. But soon, I realized people understood me even if I wasn't perfect. I'll never forget asking for directions in London. I mispronounced a word, and the man smiled kindly and repeated it back correctly. Instead of feeling ashamed, I laughed and repeated after him. That small interaction showed me that most people are patient and supportive if you're making an effort. 3. Everyday conversations. I also pushed myself to start small conversations in daily life. For example, if I saw a tourist in my city, I would offer help in English. Or when I met someone online in a game or community, I made an effort to type or speak in English instead of my native language. These moments felt risky at first, but they built real confidence. I realized that confidence is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. Now, English is not just a subject for me. It's a tool I use every day with friends, at work, while traveling, and even for fun. More importantly, it's a skill that has given me confidence, opportunities, and a new version of myself. So how did this transformation really happen? Let me summarize the key steps and lessons I learned along the way. 1. I changed my mindset. The biggest shift wasn't in my grammar or vocabulary, it was in my head. I stopped trying to be perfect and started focusing on communication. I accepted mistakes as part of learning. Instead of asking, "What if I fail?" I asked, "What can I say with what I know?" That simple change unlocked my courage. 2. I built small daily habits. Consistency beats intensity. I didn't study 10 hours once a week. I studied 20 to 30 minutes every day, reading short articles, listening to podcasts, writing my thoughts in English, and practicing speaking even just to myself. Created a rhythm that built my fluency slowly but surely. 3. I made English part of my life. Instead of treating English like homework, I surrounded myself with it. I watched movies with subtitles, listened to English music, and joined online communities where English was the main language. This immersion made English feel natural instead of forced. 4. I practiced with people. Language lives in conversation. I found partners, joined speaking clubs, and even talked to tourists. These interactions gave me the confidence that no textbook ever could. Real conversations full of mistakes, pauses, and laughter were where I grew the most. 5. I faced real-world challenges. Presentations, work meetings, and traveling abroad were terrifying at first. But each time I survived, I gained strength. The world became my classroom, and every mistake turned into a stepping stone toward fluency. 6. I celebrated small wins. Confidence doesn't arrive all at once. It grows in small victories. Understanding a joke, being complimented by a colleague, or finishing a book in English. I learned to celebrate these moments instead of waiting until I was perfect. Now, when I look at who I've become, I see someone transformed not just in language, but in life. English gave me more than words. It gave me courage, resilience, and belief in myself. But my journey doesn't end here. That's why I'm sharing my story with you. Because I know how hard it feels to start. I know the frustration of not finding the right words, the embarrassment of making mistakes, and the doubt that whispers, "Maybe I'll never be good at this." I'm here to tell you it's possible. If I could do it, you can too. So here's my final advice to anyone learning English. Don't aim for perfection, aim for progress. Practice every single day, even in small ways. Surround yourself with English, make it part of your lifestyle. Speak, even if you're scared. Confidence only grows when you use your voice. Learn to laugh at mistakes. They are proof that you're trying. Celebrate every small win, you'll realize how much you've grown. Today, when I speak in English, I don't just feel like I'm using another language. I feel like I'm expressing the best version of myself, the version that didn't give up, that kept going when it was hard, that turned fear into confidence. And if you're on this journey now, remember, your English story is being written, step by step. Keep going, and one day, you'll look back like I do now with pride, gratitude, and a smile. If my story shows anything, it's that confidence in English isn't about being perfect, it's about being brave enough to keep going. Every mistake you make is proof that you're learning. So, keep speaking, keep practicing, and never let fear silence your voice. And if this inspired you, please subscribe and share because your support helps more learners, just like you, find the courage to speak with confidence.